You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in. All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Mickie Kennedy, the president and founder over at eReleases. Mickie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Thanks for coming on today. Can you start out with giving us a little bit of an overview? What is eReleases? What do you guys do?
So eReleases is a press release distribution service. We do offer writing, but predominantly people know us as a place to upload their press release and get it sent to the media. All of our releases go out over PR Newswire, which is the oldest and largest newswire of press releases in the US. And they all go out nationally. And we've been doing this for over 25 years.
So for maybe listeners that haven't experimented with a press release before, why should businesses be putting money into press releases?
I think the biggest reason is the ability for it to leverage and go far. If you have a newsworthy message, it can really resonate with the media and you can get a great deal of media coverage. I initially started, over 27 years ago, working for a telecom research startup and sending out releases for them and getting it right resulted in, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional revenue, a whole new audience, as well as the ability for us to be recognized industry-wide. And when I started, we were selling our research for $600 a year, and they're still in business, and it starts at over $20,000 a year. By getting all that credibility that comes with earned media and that recognition within the industry, they've been able to greatly raise their price and enhance the value perceived for their services and data.
Oh, that is amazing. Talk about a price hike there. That's the dream if you can go up by that percentage over time. So within that is really the big subject that I want to get into today is how to craft a winning press release. And I think a good way of looking at it is asking the broad question of how is it that you go about creating a press release that does get that national media attention that really truly goes viral, as opposed to maybe a press release that, gets picked up by a couple local publications, but maybe only brings a dozen people to your website. So maybe a good place to start out in there, are there certain types of topics that you find perform really well for generating that national media driving press release?
Right. So basically engaging into a story, including elements for a story arc. Journalists naturally like to write in a story arc, even if it's just a 3-paragraph article. If you read the newspaper or magazines, you'll often see that there's a rhythm and a flow and a sort of climactic moments in a good story. And a lot of times people forget that and don't put the elements needed to tell a story. The most common press release that we get at eReleases is probably the product launch press release. And we get it. When you launch a product, that is newsworthy and important to you. But the press release is just, here's a new product, here's a list of features, and here's a page to learn more or buy it. And what would make it a lot more fulfilling towards a story arc is perhaps include a use case study. I assume this product didn't see the light of day or service didn't see the light of day without people trying it and sharing their experiences. So take someone who had a very favorable experience and share it, ideally with data points. Like this transportation company was experiencing a 7% loss of profit annually, and they started using this logistics software solution. And 90 days later, they were able to forecast that they'd be able to achieve a profit by year's end. And so that's whoa, that's a really big difference for that company. Also include a quote by them as to the product or the ease of use or the actual results that they got. You can also take publicly available data and inject it in the press release. So maybe you want to point out that 73% of new transportation companies fell in the first 5 years because they failed to achieve profitability. So that shows the stakes of why your solution is so important. And all that makes it more likely that a journalist has the material they need to craft a story arc and therefore get you the media attention that you're looking for. We sort of approach PR sort of greedy, where we want it, we know what we want and we just push it out there. But what you have to realize is that a busy journalist is trying to decide, is this going to entertain or educate or ideally both their audience? And if you fail to do that, then they're not going to want to share this with their audience. And you may feel it's extremely important to you, but you just failed to get that across in a way that a journalist would find engaging and have the building blocks for them to write it into an article.
A lot of different opportunities that come out of there. But to your point of weaving the story in there, and especially if you can, let's say, take that product launch and find a way to really talk about that customer who was struggling before working with your product. They work with your product and it helps them to achieve the outcome they're looking for. You had mentioned the idea of pulling in like industry stats as well. I'd love to hear, first of all, are there, and we can pick a tangible industry if that makes it a more straightforward question, but are there really good sources that you recommend businesses go to find some of this great publicly available data? Let's start out there.
I just usually just look online. I recommend any searches. Basically, unless it's from a suspect source, you should be okay. The better data that people seem to like is from government agencies or recognized nonprofits or NGOs and things like that. But even if it's just publicly available data from a private company, there's no real problem with that. It's just if there's a perception company is attached to something a little, maybe it leans political a certain way or something like that, then it gets a little messy to include that kind of data. Just use sort of a common sense approach. I think that works really well. But when it comes to businesses, there's a lot of Small Business Association, SBA data that people use, but it can really come from lots of different places. And once it's out there, it's for you to be able to utilize, just cite according to and what organization or company that data came from.
And let's say maybe for those that are looking to put out their own study, maybe they're even looking to get a press release put out for a big study that they're releasing. Are there good sources that you really like to go to help get more survey respondents so that you can get a bigger pool, get a more reputable study, and then ultimately just have a better solution that you can provide to a journalist?
Right. So actually authoring the data is probably the biggest swing and hit for most people. When people generally do a survey of their industry, we see a lot of media pickup. The real key is asking meaningful questions that are timely. Like right now, post-pandemic, work has changed a bit. A lot of more people working hybrid or from home. So you could ask questions around work culture, or you could ask questions about hiring and things like that. But when it comes to actually where do you get the results, people to actually take the survey, I find a great partner is a trade association, ideally a small or independent one. The large trade associations usually have their own media team and they really don't need you because they get lots of media attention already. But the smaller and more independent trade associations, usually 500, 600 members or more, and some are quite large with a couple of thousand members, but they're still not what you would consider large compared to maybe the industry veteran association in the industry. Those work really well. And the way I do it is I take that link, I use SurveyMonkey and send it along to them and say, hey, I'm doing a survey on our industry. I was wondering if you'd be willing to send this out to your members. In exchange for that, I'll mention you in a press release that we'll be issuing in the coming weeks. And so these smaller and independent trade associations, many people don't know about them. And I suspect that you don't even realize the ones you have in your own industry that are out there. You're looking for one that's sort of modeled on your business. And so you're going to find a lot of them that are like too small or too sort of niche specific, like Florida PR firms for me or something like that wouldn't be relevant, but maybe like independent PR shops or PR firms of 50 employees or less. There's these trade associations that exist. Pick one and give them that approach. And generally that works 2/3 of the time. So that's really a great way to get them to send your link out. I do also usually add that we're looking for at least 100 responses. So if we don't get it, I circle back with them and they'll usually pitch it again through social media or email or sometimes both, just to sort of get those numbers up. The great thing about these smaller and independent trade associations is people generally belong to them because of some kind of loyalty, that they get something really solid out of it. So when they get these appeals to do a survey, they're much more likely to do it than if they just saw a survey request on LinkedIn or a friend just sent it along and they didn't really know the context of it.
Let's take a tangible example here. So let's say I've used this one as a past example. Let's say I am an e-commerce business. I am selling like luxury pillows. For my business, any thoughts on how I could go about actually finding some of these trade organizations that might be relevant for me to reach out to? Are there like specific Google searches, specific websites that you go to try and find those opportunities?
I usually just do Google searches and I'll type list of and then specific industry trade associations. And you'll find that people, usually blogs, are really good at doing a roundup of a few. And I just sort of follow along and go down a few little rabbit holes until I find a few good candidates. And generally, you only need 2 or 3 that sort of meet the criteria of having enough members. And I have really good luck 2/3 of the time. The first one says yes. And I've never had to go to a third that I can recall, or any of the clients that I've coached through that process.
Obviously, if you work with a press release service, this part of the heavy lifting is going to be done for you. But let's say that I'm taking the do-it-yourself approach. I'm really trying to get media coverage for my pillow brand, the hypothetical pillow brand. Are there certain guidelines that you find that are really effective to find journalists that maybe I can reach out to directly?
So you're going to look for journalists who sort of cover your industry. So if you're in the pillow and bedding space, you're going to look at, what are key publications for you that you'd love to be in. Some are going to be industry specific, like trade publications. Some are going to be like newspapers. What writers have previously written about your industry? And does it seem like there's a common person or 2 people that generally cover your industry? And then you're going to reach out to them, ideally through email, though email is harder to reach people today than it was 20 some years ago when I started. The big thing that's come out over the last 20 some years are media databases. And unfortunately, when people buy a license, an annual license to a media database, and they spend $10,000 or more for that, they might sell golf clubs and realize that there's only a couple of thousand people that would be interested in that. So they start talking themselves into spamming other editors and writers, like people who are financial analysts and people who cover the banking industry, with the thought in their head that bankers and finance guys like to play golf, but they don't realize that your financial analyst is never going to write about golf clubs. So all you're doing is just littering their email inbox with off-target stuff. And most national media have just really, their inbox is chaos because of this. Local media has got a little bit of that, but it's less of a problem than it is for national media. You can probably email locally with more confidence than you can the national media.
Definitely. And on top of the fact that you're very likely to get your email ignored at the very least, if you just mass blast a bunch of journalists, you do also run into that risk that a handful of them are going to say, oh, this is clearly spam. They're going to either report you as spam and lower your email delivery rates for your entire inbox, or potentially they're going to say, hey, this is a violation of the Can Spam Act, which, listeners, if you haven't heard of that, definitely look that up before you do any sort of like cold outreach to make sure you don't get sued by any of these big publications. But Mickie, within that, for a lot of people, it's going to make way more sense to go the press release route, work directly with you or work with another press release service. Let's say I'm taking that route. You had mentioned the idea that one of the big things that drives success for a press release is really creating that character arc and telling a story. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about that. So I'm sitting down, I have my brand new pillow that I just released. It's a pillow that has the perfect level of plushness to it, and it always stays a little bit cool, like no matter how long you rest on it. So for those that run warm when they're sleeping, it's the perfect night pillow to keep you cool. How could I start about thinking to write that press release story?
So I think that would be a perfect time to sort of brainstorm and say, are there data points around the perfect plushness of a pillow, or how people wake up with their neck hurting or just not feeling good, like they got a good sleep and good rest? What kind of numbers are there? So, around that. And there probably are some out there that say 43% of people who feel that they didn't get a good night's sleep feel that they perform worse on the job or at work. And see what's out there data wise, put that on your board for consideration of points to include. Sort of formulate what the goal is. Of course, it's to launch this pillow, but are there experts that who've looked at the pillow and said, hey, this chiropractor feels like you've nailed everything. This really supports the neck and the vertebrae in a way that's unlike anything else that's out there. And are they comfortable giving you quotes and discussing that in a press release? And so adding experts gives you legitimacy. Ones that are nationally recognized, of course, are the best, but not having that, then you've got the ability to lean on people who are just really recognized in their industry, what their credentials are, how long they've been in the industry. All of that can go a long way in sort of describing them and who they are and what authority they might have in being able to give their feedback on your product or solution.
Looking at just some of the granular details within that press release copy, are there certain maybe lengths of copy that you find perform better than others? Whether you say, best to aim for something that's 2,000 plus words or best to aim for something that's less than 500 words. Do you have any strong views there?
I'd say 500 words is a sweet spot. As long as you keep it between 400 and 600 words is probably ideal. I recognize that sometimes the copy, especially if it's a very technical product, might be a little bit longer, leaning towards the 600 words. I did a press release about a company that had 4 founders, and they all were very different and came from very esoteric, weird backgrounds. So I felt like we needed to touch on each of them, because I felt like that was going to be probably what resonated with the media, was how did a professional clown and a doctor and a physicist and everybody all come together to form this company? And I felt like that would be really intriguing. So that one did lean towards the longer side. I think anything less than 400 words, you may not have given them enough background information for them to be able to write an article. So if you do find that you're coming really short, I would look at it and say, are there additional elements that you can add? Most press releases follow a format of a headline, a date line, which usually has the city and state and the date of distribution, but that gets added at the wire. So if you don't have to worry about getting the date wrong there. And then an introductory paragraph and then subsequent paragraphs. But towards the end, there's usually the opportunity for you to include a boilerplate if room allows. And that's usually where it's an elevator pitch about the company. Microsoft's usually say about Microsoft, and then 2 to 4 sentences about the company. And that usually gets recycled and used in all the press releases, that sort of same elevator pitch that you can modify it at any time and add additional elements and things like that. So given that, are you using a boilerplate? Could it be fleshed out a little bit more? Could you incorporate a story there in your boilerplate, like something strange that happened with the origin of your company? Everybody that goes on Shark Tank usually shares a story about how their company or product was created. And usually they're interesting or quirky or fun or vulnerable. Someone lost a job, or they lost a loved one, like a father they used to make something with, and they realized, I wonder if I could take that product to market and make it a little bit different and more streamlined and things along those lines. And one of the reasons that they work so well is we're very story oriented, and it really helps to sort of build a bit of emotional response, a human interest element. And I think that's why so many people, when they go on that show, sort of get vulnerable and they share something, whether it's emotional or inspirational or just an obstacle or even something quirky. It makes them memorable and really hones in that sort of human interest element that all of us strive for. We like to relate to people and we like stories. So if you can combine all of that, you'll do really well.
When I'm thinking about putting out a press release, let's say I'm trying to time the press release and upcoming product launch. So I have my high-end pillow, the hypothetical pillow that never gets too warm on you. I'm planning on releasing it, let's say a month from now. And my goal is I really want to get some media attention for it within a week, maybe 2 weeks of it being live. Are there certain guidelines you could offer for good ways to think about maybe the timing of that press release, whether it's hey, make sure you have it written by X days prior to when you want to get attention, or any guidance you can share there?
I recommend that people do their release after they've had a soft launch. I have seen so many people strive to have their media announcement go live and the product's not yet available on their website. And it just creates a disconnect for the media. So the media is like, oh, did this get pushed back? Is it not going live yet? I don't know. And then all of a sudden that puts a halt on everything that they're considering, and they're just going to steamroll and move forward with the next story and probably won't even come back to your consideration. There are people who have a track record going to specific key media and giving them an advance and saying, hey, could you embargo this till we launch? And if you have a track record of launches, then I think that could work. But if you don't, I think it's too risky. And I think a lot of journalists are going to feel it's a little too risky as well. I don't see anybody getting hurt by having it available and soft launching and making sure that the e-commerce is working and everything is on track and you're taking a few orders and it's working, and then do a media push or then do an ad push or something along those lines. I see so many people crash and burn where they've actually had the front page of Red Herring magazine during the .com era for a product that got pulled before it launched. And it was very embarrassing for Red Herring, very embarrassing for that company. That company didn't survive. It was such a backlash from the media that they ended up just going under. I also think that because of many things like that happening in the past, the media is very apprehensive about even considering stories about unknown companies with unknown founders about a launch before they can actually see the product on the website and it being available for purchase. And just soft launch it. Everything's going well. Then do a push with a press release and feel very comfortable knowing that everything is going to work.
And I will say, even just looking at it from the SEO side of things, like really the space that I spend the most time in, we see the same trend in particular when businesses are like redesigning their website. In some cases, maybe they're moving from, let's say, like being built on WordPress to a Shopify, or they're moving from Webflow to WordPress, whatever it may be. One of the really common trends we'll hear is we'll talk to businesses and maybe they'll say, oh, we need to make sure we have the site launched by this day. It's the internal deadline. Everyone on the team is getting ready to promote it. And 9 times out of 10, I'll say, like, you're not going to launch on that date. You're nowhere near that. You're 2 months away from that date. Like, definitely lower the expectations. Tell people, hey, it's going to be delayed. We'll give you a 2-week notice before we're ready to go live, which is going to be 2 weeks later than we're expecting that the site is going to be ready to go. So I love that idea to say, hey, do the soft launch first. And then from there, once you've confirmed everything is up and running, let's say all the pipes are running smoothly, you have product inventory, you have it on your website, then is the time to really go out and try and get that national distribution.
Yeah. And I'm really big about under promising and over delivering. So if I feel like we have something that's coming out on a particular date, like say December 1st, I'm going to just say, hey, we hope to have it out by the end of the year. And if we come out early, people are like, oh, wow, this is great. But if we miss that December 1st and it comes out a few weeks later, we're still within what we told people. I do the same thing with our writing services where we tell people it takes 2 to 3 business days to write. And the goal is to get it to them within 2 days. But if we miss the mark and it's a third day, it's still within what we told them the realm is. But the bulk of people, more than 90%, are going to get it faster than we told them the range was. And despite that, I work with some companies occasionally that promise something to me and then they don't deliver time and time again. And I'm just like, I don't know why they promise these deadlines when they don't meet them on a regular basis. If I was them, I would change my wording and phrasing and put a buffer in there that keeps things safe so that they are always delivering on time or even a little ahead of time.
Oh, couldn't agree anymore. It's one of the biggest pieces of feedback I always try to share with our team internally is, hey, if you expect something is going to be completed by Wednesday of next week, tell people that you'll have it done by Monday of the following week. Give yourself that 3 business day buffer, let's say. Most likely, they're going to be psyched that you get it to them that following Monday. And if you get it to them a couple days early on Thursday or a business day early on Friday, they're going to be like, wow, this is great. They over-delivered for us. I think part of it is I think some people have this mindset of like, oh, everyone wants their thing to be done ASAP. And sometimes that's true. But to your point, a lot of times people don't really care whether it's done like on the Wednesday, the Thursday, the Friday. They just want to know like, hey, when am I ready to go to the next step of the process?
Sure.
But that's a really common mistake I've seen as well. I love that you give that buffer time in there. Well, let's talk a little about maybe analyzing results of a press release. So let's say that I decide, hey, we're going to put out a press release for this hypothetical pillow that I'm launching. Are there certain metrics that I should really look to monitor? Are there certain maybe data points that I should look to indicate whether like, hey, we did everything perfectly and this went as well as expected, or hey, we totally botched this and we really need to go back to the drawing board and restructure a lot of this before we do it again?
Right. So I think a little bit of it involves what the goal is with the PR. Are you looking for articles? I mean, that's what I feel like the goal should be, to have articles written about you. Generally, that results in an uptick in sales, uptick in traffic, more people looking at you and considering you. So all of those metrics are appropriate to look at. The type of metrics that I feel aren't important are the syndication of a press release. And when I talk about that, I mean the press release replicated on a few websites. Every time a press release goes out over the wire in the US, it's PR Newswire and Business Wire make up the Newswire or press releases. And they differ from the other types of wires people may have heard of, like the Associated Press and Reuters, in that they don't run press releases. They run articles that they've written and they license those to newspapers and other media outlets. With Business Wire and PR Newswire, and we work with PR Newswire, you're looking to get that press release out. You're looking to leverage it and get some media attention. And it's really difficult to sort of gauge what the possibility is, but it could be trade publications that pick it up. And maybe that's not your customer market, but it does give you a boost in credibility. And it is something that you could put on your website. It's something that you could share with your leads and your customers. And so you'll find that as you have earned media, it does increase your conversion rate. It also makes customers who maybe were considering leaving you, it reduces that churn that happens as a result of that, because they see this social proof and implied endorsement that kind of happens when a journalist writes about you, and they get that goodwill and that signal of trust, and they want to stick around. And the same thing happens with the customers that come through those. But like I said, it doesn't always happen. Now, the syndication part that I had mentioned is just the replication of the press release. And that happens with everybody. And the press release might appear on Yahoo News or Yahoo, usually Yahoo Finance, because it's sort of designed for publicly traded companies, and a few other little websites. But if it's the press release duplicated, that's not important. That's syndication. There are businesses that only specialize in that. You will never have a journalist write about you if you use them. They're usually $100 or a little bit more. And they'll promise you a bunch of these clips and places that syndicate the press release. They're usually on sections of the website that if you went and did a search on that website, it wouldn't even show up. It's usually a subdomain or a folder on the website that's just separate from the rest of them. And really the only people that'll ever see that press release is you. Some people like to be able to incorporate the logos and put them on their website and stuff like that. But it really isn't a real article about you. My goal is to get real, what we call earned media, when a journalist actually writes an article about you. And that cannot happen in that world of syndication. It only happens when you go over a proper newswire or get in front of an actual journalist via email or pitching them over the phone, which PR firms do. And I feel like the syndication is sort of great, a little bit of acknowledgement that you're out there, but you're really looking for that earned media. And it can result in everything from sales, inquiries, to just elevating you within your industry. When I worked for the telecom company. When we got in trade publications, we rarely got sales right then, but we did, we're able to increase our prices and get recognition, be asked for events and stuff like that. And when people were ready later to buy, they would definitely consider us. If we went into new markets, which we did, where we were talking about patterns with telecom traffic and economic growth following telecom growth in burgeoning countries, that would result in sales, usually from hedge funds and investment companies and stuff like that we'd never worked with previously. So it opened us up to all different new audiences. PR is about being open to all the opportunities that come from it without really controlling what those are going to be. And sometimes it will be sales, sometimes it will be leads, sometimes it will just be an opportunity for you to take those links and share them with your existing customers. But just being open to what comes can really result in a pattern over time where you are getting media coverage, and some of it is leading to sales, some of it is leading to contracts, some of it is leading to people in your industry knowing about you more and putting you on the radar to consider you later when they are looking for the tools or resources or services that you offer.
That was so insightful. And building upon what you were saying, like I've personally done just a small handful of press releases. Our company rebranded back in, I think it was 2021 maybe. And we did a press release that I would say totally flopped. And I looked at Google Analytics afterwards, and I think we got maybe 10 visitors to the site from that press release. And to your point, it was great because we got to say, oh, we were syndicated in all these massive publications. The syndications didn't really drive any actual business value to us. It's when you get featured in those big name publications, get quoted in there, get cited in there as a resource, that is really where like the SEO value comes into play, but B, that reputational value and ultimately that customer growth really comes from in the process. Mickie, this has been fascinating. I want to wrap up in the next couple of minutes here. I would love to just open the floor to you and see, are there maybe any resources that you can recommend for listeners that are really interested in exploring press releases? Maybe they're interested in trying to pick up media attention on their own, or just interested in working with a press release service.
Sure. So I have a free masterclass that's less than an hour-long video and some accompanying materials that I think would be a great place for anybody to start. It'll also walk you through how to get local media without using anybody, just being able to do it on your own. But it also goes through the types of strategic releases that do get picked up. The truth is 97% of press releases probably fail to get earned media. But what I did was I looked at our clients. We move about 10,000 releases a year. And I saw that 3% and I saw patterns within them. And so I talk about the types of releases you could be doing that are going to yield a much higher chance of media pickup. And that's available at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, it's completely free. And if anybody has any questions or wants more information, feel free to reach out to my staff. It's only editors, no salespeople. And you can do that at eReleases.com through chat, email, or over the phone during business hours. And all our social media is on the lower right of our website. And that does take you to my direct LinkedIn, which is also a great place to reach out to me personally as well.
And listeners, we'll add a bunch of those links into the show notes as well. So you can A, sign up for the masterclass, and B, just be able to reach out to Mickie and his team and start working directly with them. But once again, listeners, this is Mickie Kennedy, the president over at eReleases. Mickie, thank you for coming on today.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.